Let's go ahead and call the roll. This is going to be easier with you there, if you don't mind.
Not at all. I'm ready. Okay. Reed Williams.
Here.
Dr. Cantu.
Here.
John Agatha.
Here.
Anakwa.
She's here.
Okay, I thought I saw her come in. Thank you. Councilwoman Viagran.
Here.
Peter Onontre.
Here.
Andy Castillo.
Here.
Al Rodriguez. Michael Kinnick.
Online.
Anne Marie. Is she there? I can't see if that's her or not.
She's here.
Okay. Jack Hebden.
Here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wayne Eddington.
I think I saw him. Didn't I see Jack? Maybe not. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so is Jack here? I'm sorry, I got confused.
Yeah, Jack's here.
Okay, and then Wayne Eddington. Okay, Wayne's not there. Okay. Anthony Edwards. Michael Sanchez.
I'm here.
Didi. Didi Belmars.
Here.
Thank you. Her.
Here.
Thank you. Christopher Fullerton. Dr. Finney.
Present.
Dana.
Online.
Jim Berg.
Here.
Anita Ledbetter.
Here.
Okay, we definitely have a quorum today, Reed.
All right. That's great. Thank you all very much for all being here or tuning in. Okay. The first order of business is the invocation. Jose Reyes.
Yes, sir. Can I confirm that y'all can hear me?
We can.
Very good. Thank you. Please join me for the invocation. We thank you for the many blessings that you've freely given to each of us. We ask for your presence to guide this meeting of the CPS RAC. Provide them with the knowledge, compassion, and the wise counsel needed as they discuss the business matters on the agenda today. Help us all to remember that we are stewards acting on behalf of our customers, and provide us with the grace to serve all people well. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much. We'll now have public input. Our first speaker is Ryan Weber.
Thank you, sir. Hello, my name is Ryan Weber. I am a member of the San Antonio Climate Ready Joint Committee, but I am not here in an official capacity, here clearly speaking only as myself. Going to get straight to a couple of points based on the presentations before the RAC today, specifically looking at the generation planning through the lenses of metrics, emissions, and cost. The scoring metrics used have to, as of necessity, simplify the results. We have to do it. However, the specific metrics chosen and the method they were applied generate cumulative scores that misrepresent the performance of the different scenarios and do so disproportionately and in a compounding fashion. For example, weighting the uniform step performance across all portfolios as 4 under the environmental factor dilutes the average score of the others, shrinking the disparity between performances that have radically different results. In a result, scenario 1, as an example, has 17 times lower emissions than scenario 1, portfolio 1, and yet it only has a 3 times advantage in the resulting score. Similarly, and in the opposite direction under affordability and average cost, portfolios 6 and 7 are only 12% more expensive than baseline portfolio 1, but they receive 75% less rating points. This disproportionality creates the misunderstanding of how these portfolios actually perform in relation to each other, and compounded together produce metrics that may not lead CPS or the RAC to make the decisions that are best informed by the deep data and work done in this scenario. The second to consider is emissions. As Charles Rivers slide 27 from the October 17th RAC shows, very few portfolios seem likely to achieve CAP's stated 2050 net target, and several don't even achieve its 2030 or 2040 targets. While new technology may come that helps make this possible later, that technology is built into current scenarios, and these portfolios still are not performing. To take a portfolio that does not show any chance of making the 2050 target and assume that some future RAC will make different choices doesn't seem to be the remit of this organization. And finally, on cost, the reality of climate change is that we face the need for utter transformation of our energy sector. It's a massive, daunting challenge, hard to imagine and even harder to try to guess how much it would cost. But we no longer have to guess. As Charles Rivers and CPS have done, we have built out a scenario that shows achievement of the 2050 in some of these scenarios. And the entire difference of a complete transformation of our energy sector is 12%. The cost difference between the scenarios 6 and 7 versus scenario 1 and 4 of the average cost per megawatt hour. 12% cost to utterly transform our energy generation. That's what the metrics of this committee have shown, and it doesn't seem too high a price to consider. Thank you.
Okay, David, is it Walter? Okay.
Thank you, Chair Reed. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this public comment. My name is David Walter. I am a former chair of the CPS Citizens Advisory Committee. I also, like Ryan, serve on the Climate Readiness Committee, Joint Committee. I am also just representing my own comments and not the comments of the committee as a whole. What I'd like to first off open up is just commend the committee for the work that you've done so far. I've watched on the sidelines and I recognize the extreme work and data that you've had to get through to go through this analysis and important decisions for San Antonio and CPS. What I want to bring up today is on the factor of reliability. Reliability was highlighted by this committee as the #1 priority, and it was also confirmed by the polling from the surveys. Overwhelming was the highest priority, along with the other important metrics. But I think what that clearly says is San Antonio as a whole, along with the other environmental and affordability metrics, wants to keep the lights on. So I think that should be a primary focus. And as you've taken that look, but we want to make sure that the analysis is done appropriately. So as I've looked at the way the analysis is done, I do have some concerns. While there's two metrics that measure reliability, one is the capacity, the other one is on extreme weather. And I'll talk about the extreme weather right now because that's the easiest one to describe. But the way the extreme weather analysis is done is it looks at a summer event and a winter event. And basically what it does, if you take the winter event, for instance, it runs it through a scenario like Winter Storm Uri, which is appropriate. However, what it does is it looks at the shortfall of generation compared to the load of the native load for CPS. And it basically assumes that whatever deficit you have, you can buy off the grid. The problem is that generation won't be there. As we saw in Winter Storm Uri, ERCOT had the same issues that CPS was going through. So you're basically relying on another system that shares the same risk as you, that's undergoing the same weather event that you are. So the way the analysis is done is basically it says that generation will be available. I'll go out and buy it at an extreme price, $5,000 a megawatt hour, and then we evaluate the different portfolios. The problem is the power is not going to be there. So you can't buy it at any price. And that's what we saw in Winter Storm Uri. Basically what it says is if I wave up a bunch of dollars, nature doesn't respond to dollars. The wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine when I wave up more dollars. So that's a flaw in that analysis. Even if you look at the summer analysis, what it does is it basically says, we run through a scenario with extreme heat. You only look at the excess load generated by that, but it doesn't look at issues related to lack of wind or even fossil fuels that go down. So basically what you're doing is you're looking only at the cost component of those reliability events, but you're not analyzing appropriately whether the lights are actually going to be on. So I think what we're clearly showing is, or that San Antonio really wants, is reliability related to how the power is going to be generated. And we want to make sure that all these portfolios are analyzed appropriate to ensure that.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, David. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is early on in this part of the process, as y'all remember, somebody's glasses here. I'm not sure. It's the reason I wear them all the time. Yeah. So early on in the process, Dr. Romero asked that we give our weightings on the objectives. We did that. And just recently, she's also requested that we work those weightings into the portfolio metric results, which we're going to do here in a very, very short presentation. Now, a couple of things, if we can get the presentation up, I want to mention, y'all have probably read it in the Burns and McDonnell final report, which I recommend to each one of you to read. This is the peer review report. It was given to you today. We're not going to go through a presentation because this is primarily a session for the individuals on the rack to talk about the portfolios. Okay, please advance to slide 1. I can? Okay, if this works, I'll do it. I just got to figure out which way this gun goes. There you go. No, that didn't do it. There you go. Okay, what we have here is a color coding. Now, for those of us that are colorblind and even wear a lot of brown, that's not the easiest to do. And as several people have brought up, and as clearly many people have mentioned to me, the metrics are not all that, if you will, well defined, but the metrics are, but the color coding, it's really pretty definitive in environmental and in reliability. Affordability, I would refer you to Chad's charts. Those are really quantitative and help. But however you want to take it, if you can say these color codings are wrong, they are relative, okay? So what we're doing here is we're using judgment, relative judgment of what we believe as individuals and hopefully collectively what we think is the best option to recommend to the board. So let's move on. Now, when we did the dots on the wall, one of the criteria was financial stability. Since then, we've made the case, and Charles River Associates has actually put those metrics, financial metrics or financial requirements, in as constraints in the model. Remember, we're looking at a cost minimization, LP. These are constraints that have to be met through the whole period. So when you take that out, you then get the weighting in the upper right. Now, we also discussed, and I think most people are in agreement, but we left it this way since this is the way you did it. And most people have said, and tried to make the point as others did, that flexibility and reliability are both, flexibility is a element of reliability. So we left it separate, but as mentioned by one of our speakers, you can see that between flexibility and reliability, that's 47% of the weight. The rest of them were left where they were, obviously. Now, this is an unweighted chart. This is just giving 4 for a good and 1 for a bad. You could have used 170, you could have used any 4 separation, okay? I'm not saying 1 and 4 is the best, but that's what was used because frankly, it keeps the numbers kind of low. But what it does do is that you have to be very careful. You look at the unweighted score of these, and this is your opinion. This is not Charles Rivers. This is, while they put the metrics together, this is your level of importance on these things. Then when you go and you put your weightings on 37, 27, 24, 10, and 2, you then get a weighted score, okay? This is not fancy math. This is just a weighted average, okay? And when you do that, you get to see 2 things. In each category, with the higher number being better, what is the relative performance of that portfolio in relationship to that to that objective? And then you can get a weighted across. So for example, on reliability, you can start out, P2 is 1, 2, and you can see the relationships. Environmental stability, obviously you got some 0.88, 0.88s, and then and you got a 1.6, 1.06. So you can see within the portfolios and within the criteria how they weight. Affordability, again, a very important item. The lowest one here is 49, and that's a tie between 8 and 2. And then system flexibility, again, which is part of reliability. You can look at those and see, okay, 40.41, 0.41, and 3.1, 4.1, and you get the dispersion there. Workforce impact, really, because it just had 2% of the vote, does not make a big impact. We left it instead of redistributing that because, again, to stay pure with what you put on the board. That is just a way, I'm going to leave that up there. That is just a way so that people can start talking about the individual portfolios. Our task today is for individuals to talk about portfolios, because in a little over a week, you're going to have to say what you prefer. And I think that'll be very important information for the board. And then maybe through a series of voting, we can get 13 people to vote on a portfolio, maybe not. So what we're going to do today, I think everybody has this in their packet or they have it at home. So please take this down, the pictures of the folks up, and put the chat on the side, if you would, please. Thank you. All right. And I see we got Mr. Edwards joined us, and did we have anybody else join? Did we have John Christian there? If not, he's there now. So, okay, let's go ahead and start. The first thing we want to do is ask individuals, and we'll give you some time here, and let's stay positive, okay? Not negative, okay? We'll have time to get negative. Everybody loves to get negative, but let's stay positive for a minute. And I would like to see who would like to speak in favor, okay? And we're not going to have a debate at this time. We're going to go around and say, I prefer this one, and this is why. Now, we can't spend 4 hours doing this. Please, when you say why, try to put it in a sentence or two, because if it's more complicated than that, trust me, people have quit listening. So let's go ahead and see. We'll start in the room. There's another reminder here. There's a minus sign near the top of your WebEx screen to zoom in. Okay, y'all need to realize that. Or you can take your fingers and do that if you're on some screens. All right. I've got to, I'll make a list and I'll just ask who wants to speak first about a portfolio that they feel is worth further discussion, because I believe hopefully we'll be able to narrow these down for good discussion on, 4 or 5 portfolios. All right, I'm looking on the screen. I don't see any people. I'm looking in the room. No one's below the table, but no one's wanting to speak. Is this the end of the meeting? Okay. All right. I didn't mean to have to sound like somebody trying to get bids for an auction item, but all right, Peter. And I did work in a auction yard for many years, so I can actually listen to that if I have to and say it a little bit. But go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Reed, and thanks for that presentation. And
I wouldn't really call it a presentation. It was just a recounting what y'all had done.
hey, man, I'd like to thank CPS and Charles River and Burns and McDonald for your detailed responses to our questions throughout this process. And I'd like to preface my position on the portfolio with a biblical parable related to the generation planning that we're conducting. And Jesus tells this parable. There were 10 virgins or bridesmaids waiting for the bridegroom. Each one had oil burning lamps, and they waited overnight. And as they were waiting, their fuel grew low. 5 of the virgins had extra oil in their jars, dispatchable fuel. The other 5 didn't have dispatchable fuel. And they asked those that did, can we have some of your extra oil? And they responded, go buy your own. And they went off to buy dispatchable fuel. I don't know if they couldn't afford it or they couldn't find it. But as they were gone, the bridegroom arrived and they missed the wedding. Now, Jesus called those 5 virgins foolish because they didn't prepare, they didn't have dispatchable fuel. Now, this parable is about preparing for eternity, but for our purposes today, it makes a point of the importance of our generation planning priority of reliability found through dispatchable fuel, specifically today, natural gas. Portfolio 2, in my opinion, has the greatest flexibility and reliability and opportunities to be able to incorporate dispatchability in the short term to keep us from committing. And I'm concerned with the others, 2 versus 9. I wanted to see a comparison of the 2 because 9 has a lot of benefits. And when you look at the weighted, it has the highest weighted score, 2.87, followed by, of course, 2, which is at 2.48. But I beg to differ with that outcome in respect to the cost of when the market purchases that are in that particular, in number 9, in portfolio 9, because of the cost that I would foresee in having to buy, because we don't have dispatchable as much as we would in 2, I would say that 2's weighted even greater in that respect, in my opinion. It also gives us the opportunity to transition in the short term and provide that generation capacity. And I'm going to ask a question, Reed, for the latter presentation. I'm not going to ask for an answer, but I'm just going to ask the question now to kind of help settle my case for 2. And when CPS does their presentation about the recommendation they're making, which I understand is 2 and 9. My question will be for Benny. Benny, when you do present that, if you could help me with this, can you address what you would propose to build or to buy in your recommended portfolios 2 and 9? And can you also share the pros and cons of each portfolio for maximizing CPS's ability to reliable access to affordable dispatchable energy over the next 8 to 10 years. So that's my question for when that presentation is done,
Okay.
for something for Benny to address, or whoever's going to be presenting CPS's recommendation.
Okay.
But it's 2 for me.
Okay, thank you, Pete. All right, folks, just so if you got your books there, on the October 20th on pages, this is the one I've been using, 15 and 16 are really the best places to see what the additions and how the portfolio concepts work. Because on page 15, you've got a general overall schema of the concepts, and then on page 16, you have the allowed technologies, the amount of each, and then you have the total capacity required right across there, and then you have what actually happens with for example, the spruce conversion, and then and it gives you the market purchases. I think those 2 pages are pretty succinct. Thank you, Peter. Okay, now let's see. The next person I have is on the list is Dana McGinnis. Dana, you're on.
Thank you, Reed. Actually, I hope everybody chimes in on this discussion because in looking at that, I actually lean towards number 2 as well. It's not 100% sure of it, but I think that we as a committee and CPS should look at the most reliable power with the least risk of having to go to ERCOT and buy power, which may or may not be there. One of our guest speakers said it wasn't going to be there, but we don't know that. But I think from what Charles River has laid out, that falls into unreliability in the ability to purchase power. And if you can, I'm assuming that you can, but it would be super expensive like we saw in Winter Storm. And I think CPS, especially based on its less than stellar economic situation and the fact that lots of people are having trouble paying their bills, that we need to look at something that's reliable and the least risk of having to go to ERCOT to buy power when at unknown costs or unknown quantities. And I think there are 2 or 3 of these scenarios that meet those parameters. I think you can even give a nod, but I don't think it's necessary to the emissions question, where we can without having to increase to a large extent the risk that we have to go through, with the power choice. But again, the most important things are the reliability and the least risk. And that's how I would frame it. And therefore, I would lead towards number 2 for those reasons. But there are a couple of other choices there that are worth discussions for the same factors. Possibly even number 9, which will have a lot of objections because we want to, or maybe 4, where you leave the coal plants on. But they're reliable if they're run properly. And in the general scheme of things, not that I'm trying to bash emissions or anything, but I haven't been convinced by anything that CPS has said that the actions that they've taken with the CAP program has actually reduced emissions in the city itself. I can see how if you close a coal plant or a fossil fuel plant, the emissions coming out of CPS might be lower, but it's not necessarily true that the emissions in the city would be lower. I think Councilwoman Anna Sandoval even pointed that out, saying that she thought a lot of emissions could be saved by the way buildings are built. Could be true. But I think it's, and on top of that, if you look around the state of the world even and see what what progress has been made by maybe going too fast on trying to lower emissions and go through a transition energy system. It's, I mean, it hasn't been working as well as, people would like it to have worked. And the price of power is much higher than even some people can afford. So without being too long-winded, I'd say that, we need to look at reliability and the least risk when choosing power source generation in the future. So I would lean towards number 2, but there are a couple of other choices in that same category.
Thank you, Dana. Next up is Dr. Cantu.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the slides. I have just started looking at them today, and there's a couple of questions that I have. But first, I wanted to address something that Dana had said relative to some of the struggles that people have had in paying their CPS bill, and I understand that. And I just wanted to say I think there's a lot more structural issues that are beyond CPS that also impact. We do have a city that does have a large poverty rate, and I'm not sure if just the generation planning alone and how much we consider all the portfolios in that are necessarily going to impact that. I think there's other things that can impact that. And so I just wanted to say that. I just want a few questions on the slides that were sent today where it has P1, P2, P4, and P9, and it's color coded as to benefits and risk. For the cap, which is colored light green, the like P1 does not meet cap 2030 0.6%. What is what's a 0.6? What do you mean by that?
Dr. Cantu, that's, I believe, in Benny's presentation. And so if we can either have Benny come up and address that now, or we can wait until he makes his presentation. At your call.
Okay.
All right.
Is for me or for Benny, or is that question to me or Benny?
Well, it's for you. If you want him to come now, he will. If you want
Could you do
to.
that? I'm going to have to sign off close to 4:30.
Okay, well, I'll have Benny answer your question right now because I know you have other commitments. Okay, I've got Kurt next, and then we're still looking for. Okay, Michael Kinnick after Kurt. Here's Benny.
Thanks, Reed. Hi, Dr. Cantu.
Hi.
So just so I'm clear, you were asking about in my presentation towards the back under the benefits and risks. Is that right?
Correct, where it's color coded, benefits and risk P1, P2, P4, and P9.
Right. And you were asking about the 2030, meeting the 2030 cap target and the 2040 cap target, right?
Under sustainability, right. And you just have in parentheses there at 0.6%, 2040 targets 0.105%. Just if I could, what do those percentages mean relative to sustainability or the cap?
So are you on page 11?
Well, I'm sorry. I am looking at the PowerPoint presentation that was sent today, or I think it was sent today by Ann. It said December 6th, informational update. The next slide is our commitment. Then the next slide is pathway to 2050.
Okay. So
We're working on getting there.
all right, so let me just say this, the presentation includes reference to our goal, our targets for 2030, 2040, and we didn't include 2050 here, but it would be for 2050 also. So,
Okay, but I'm just not sure what those in parentheses,
so-
those percentages mean.
right, so what they mean is the negative means the negative is green, it implies good, and it means that's how far below the target that particular item is. Red would be above the target for, let's see here, looking at P2 blend. So meets 2030 cap target, and it's got a -5%. So it means the emissions are 5% below the target.
Okay,
Yeah, negative green is good. Positive red, not good.
okay.
Okay.
Then the final question I have, when you look at benefits and risk in each one of these, but maybe particularly sustainability, were health impacts of emissions considered at all? The cost of um, the cost of asthma, inpatient admissions, anything like that. And that's just a question. If there wasn't, that's fine. I just want to see if there were any kind of
No, it's my understanding. I'm looking at John Cossip right now,
okay.
and he's saying no. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Reed.
Sure. And just to follow up on that, Dr. Cantu, there was some discussion on that with Charles River and Associates, which when we talked about externalities that they didn't impute into the cost. So that was at the last meeting. We could probably go back and get that for you too.
Okay.
Okay, the next person is Kurt Anastasio.
Thank you, Reed. Yeah. My preference on the scenarios is scenario P2. I think it's a good blended approach in terms of some of the important objectives like reliability. We move forward on environmental. We'll be at a reasonable place as best we can on cost. And having said all that, I mean, this whole area of generation and the factors we've been considering here, like emissions, environmental impact, reliability, and so forth, is such a rapidly evolving area. So, my preference to P2 is really very much influenced by, how do we get to sort of 2030 and maybe beyond that, but at least to 2030 in the best possible shape. Because I do think by then we're going to have a perspective on some new and evolving technologies, everything from carbon capture to hydrogen to renewables, and there is so much money behind so many of these options right now, and so many vested interests that speak on the. I mean, you see it just in these meetings, right? That speak on behalf of them. This is not a static picture. This is something that's going to evolve over time. But to get us sort of to the day when we have better visibility into what the next phase should be, I would prefer P2.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Okay, and just on that point, we've had several questions and the good ones from Dee Dee on the IRA. I would encourage you when we get the answers to those to read those. Whether I don't think it did anything for inflation, but it sure is a game changer as far as the money that's going to be provided to support this transition we're all facing. So, and I think that will encourage investment very rapidly. Michael Koenig.
Yes, I'll keep it real short. Make it more lengthy in another time, but I'm leaning towards 2 as well for the similar reasons that other people are saying. The biggest reason for me is reliability. I think that we really need to have that dispatchable natural gas capability. If in the event of another extreme storm, we need to know that we can, have that energy available. And then the other reason I like 2 is that it's still heading in the right direction as far as environmental concerns. It may not be quite to the extreme that some of the other options are, but it's closing down our coal plants and it's heading us in the right direction. It doesn't stop us from buying more wind and solar to use because we don't have to ramp up that dispatchable energy, but that dispatchable energy is there when we need it. So again, reliability is my major concern, and environmental is second, and that at least heads us in the right direction. Over.
Okay, thank you, Michael. We've got Adelita. You're back in. Dustin too. Sorry.
Yeah, just one thing, in terms of that comment made on carbon capture, I think there's a lot of, I just want to say there's a lot of pros and cons relative to that. But one of the things is that, carbon capture does require a lot of energy. And so we're using energy to capture carbon. So I just wanted to keep that, just to put that out there.
Okay, thank you
you.
very much. That's absolutely correct. Okay, the next one is Femi. Femi, you're on.
Yes. So I think I sort of gave my views at the last meeting, and you probably heard me say I was tipping my hand in the sense that I think ultimately we are talking about having sufficient buffer capacity for when the sun doesn't shine, when the wind doesn't blow. And so, what I was essentially saying was portfolio 2 would be my first choice. But I want to sort of give some more context for that. We're balancing risk and cost. And the way I see it, the cost is higher with respect to the natural gas and the dispatchables, yes. We might have lower fuel costs, but we're taking on more risk when we do renewables. Now, that would seem to go against the cap goals in some way, but we have to again balance. One of the things that I remembered commenting in my statement to the City Council on the adoption of the cap was that the plan wasn't complete. It was missing an economic analysis, which was done later. And that economic analysis now comes right in front of us when we talk about costs or what the analysis shows as revenue requirements. And so we're seeing the impact of cost in spite of having a need to meet certain environmental goals. So again, we're essentially trying to do a compromise here. So when we balance risk and costs, we see that portfolios that have a blend tend to, at least in my view, tend to rise above all the others. So I'm looking at P2 as my preference. P4, simply because it still retains coal, I am unwilling to support that, even though it still has a blend of some kind of dispatchables and renewables. So, when we look at cost and risk, I'm leaning again towards portfolio 2. And I want to add something else. When we look at, and I'm going back to slide 32 of the presentation that was given on November 17th. I believe that's the one. Yes, that shows the present value of revenue requirements, all scenarios, plus extreme weather. We also see that portfolio 2 seems to have better performance in terms of variability, if I can call that, use that term, under those extreme weather sensitivities, because again, it has the dispatchables built in and provides sufficient ability, really, through flexibility to meet those varying requirements under those extreme weather conditions. Again, that was something I was very particular about because I wanted to be sure that we had at least a chance to fight and to to perform better than we did in February of 2021 when we faced Winter Storm Uri. And I think that is something that Portfolio 2 can provide at least a better fighting chance against such situations. There's no guarantee. I used the term black swans back then because we cannot be sure how severe things are going to be, but we at least have a chance, a better chance to withstand those conditions with Portfolio 2. So it's still a cost that's in between the max and the mean, but it still provides us with some adequate flexibility. So that's why I'm going with Portfolio 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi. We've got Councilwoman Viagran and then Jim Berg. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Reed. I am leaning towards portfolio number 9. And then my second choice would be portfolio number 2. I'm looking forward to next week's conversation because from what was handed to me and And in the presentation, it just seems like portfolio number 9 has a few more allowed technologies, was one of the aspects of it. And then it also kind of tries to meet our environmental sustainability a little better. So that's where I am coming from. But portfolio 2 has a lot of merits too. But I would like to kind of get more of a breakdown next week on why the allowed technologies aren't completely there in portfolio 2. Thank you.
Councilwoman, I think we'll get some discussion from that in Benny's presentation, if you're able to stay with us.
Okay, great.
Next person is Jim Berg, I believe, yeah. Go ahead.
Reed,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Yes, I too align with number 2 for the reasons that others have stated, and I won't rehash them. But I'm more concerned with the ship of state, because all of this is so much talk unless CPS and unless the trustees get their act together and get this company back on its strong feet, because the way it's headed right now is not the right way. And it will spell disaster for the city if we start losing the credit ratings that we deserve and should have. And I think that it calls for management, and it calls for the politicians to stay out of the management of this company, because it is not happy days when there are 18% of the customers, not all of whom are really hurting for money, but who have gotten word that it's okay not to pay your bill. You'll get away with it. Or when you have $210 million of accounts receivable that are doubtful, or when you have only 138 days of cash and you've told credit agencies that your minimum is 150. So we can be singing our song and whistling by thinking it's a sunny day, but it's not a sunny day for our company unless and until we get our act together. And I call on the trustees, and I call on the mayor, and I call on all of us to remember what's the most important thing, and that is stability. That's all I have to say, Reed.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, let's see. All right. Next up is Anita.
Hey, everyone. I just have a couple of comments. I'm going to go back to, I think what I try to keep in mind here as I'm evaluating these options is that we are at a very transitional moment in our planning, as we've been learning the last 2 years. And really, for me, I try to ask myself this question about, what does the future look like? We are in the middle of extreme exponential rate of change, technologically, socially, environmentally. It's kind of like our job is really to think about what does that future look like down the road, and then start trying to design for it, and so that we can build to respond for that future. And, I think one of the, again, important lessons that I've really learned, the importance of us, I believe this is my personal viewpoint, that we will continue to hedge our risk by owning our own assets to a certain degree and keeping that power close to home so that we have more control over it. I will also say this, I want to follow up with something that the Councilwoman, I very much appreciated your comments and talking about how, technology, how we need to be really open to technology that's coming right here, right now. I mean, very quickly. It's, you know, when we think about goals, you know, Femi also said this when we created the CAP plan, there was only one thing that was certain about it, and that was that it was not finished. And that, you know, we have to continue to reassess and redesign our plans because of all of the changing variables and the rate of change. So, you know, when we look out 20 years from now and we start thinking about what's available, I want to think about 20 years ago. You know, 20 years ago in like 2002, most people didn't have computers in their homes. I just say that, you know, 15 years ago, I couldn't get my email on my phone. I mean, things are, you know, again, I would like to see us open up and begin to truly plan in for this future technology that's coming, so that we will, right now, for me, I think that our generation planning is really a bridging strategy, bridging strategy from the past, the way that we calculated what our generation needs will be, and in the, you know, to the future, which is like where we're trying to go. Right now, I think it's a bridging strategy where we're going to have to again, obviously, continue to come back in shorter periods of time to evaluate what that generation planning is. So anyway, as right now, those are just some of the thoughts I wanted to throw out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Okay, we've got a couple of folks here. All right, Jack, I'll just take whoever wants to go first, just speak up.
I'm
Sitting right together.
Yeah, I'll let John do most talking. And everybody has made some good points, and so I'm not going to labor on that, but just I too look at the future of this company and where it is today and our ratepayers. And so I'm trending towards P2 as well.
As am I. I will say a couple of things here. I think that everybody that is on this committee, and certainly the staff that have been here, thank you, Reed, for your leadership. You know, we've all worked really hard, sat through endless sessions here, getting to the bottom line here. Our recommendation, my hope is that once we're done with this, we go away. You know, we don't live on forever. There's a couple of things that I want to point out, kind of going off of what Jim Berg was saying. You know, we're talking like we have a lot of options here. We really don't. And the bottom line is you need money to make all this happen. And CPS Energy is sitting in a very dangerous fiscal position. It has, Rudy told us here at the last meeting, industry standards for the bond ratings are 60-40 debt to equity ratio. We're now at 61.5%. Okay, so we're over the limit in terms of maintaining what our bond ratings would be. You look at bad debt, it's growing. It's grown exponentially this year in a year when the economy is supposed to be recovering post-COVID. So that's the talk about the cash on hand for the number of days. We can point out several of these things that are going on. Took on $1 billion of debt. I mean, there's just cascading financial woes that we've had to look at. So our options are limited, so we have to pick very, very carefully as to what we're going to do. I just hope that as we go forward, we really keep in mind what the fiscal responsibility is here for this organization, even as RAC members. That's really a responsibility to the trustees, but we need to have that in mind too when we're recommending these options. Certainly for me, P2 seems to be the most reliable in terms of what the options are out there. What I don't see a whole lot of is exactly how much money are we talking about, and where does it come from, and how do we finance that without risking the financial health not only of CPS Energy, but I'm going to remind everybody, 14% of the revenues of this organization go straight to the coffers of the city of San Antonio. Okay. They're addicted to that money now, as we evidenced in the last round of voting for the excess money. Rather than giving it back to CPS Energy, which I think would have been a very good idea, they decided to know they had a better idea how to distribute that money. Well, still putting the financial pressures on this organization to keep on feeding the monkey. And so at this point, I'm going to say we really have to be careful, because that risks the city of San Antonio's credit rating as well. And that affects everybody. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you, John. Okay, let's see, let me, wait. I'm not sure. Okay, I've got, Anita was the one before. I don't think that's the second one, but I think Femi is back on for a second one. So Femi, you're up. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the last two, maybe three speakers. I want us to, if we can, whenever we have the time, not in this meeting, but whenever anyone has the time, which I believe some of us have done already, just go back to the last CPS Energy Board of Trustees meeting and play back the statement given by Trustee John Steen, which I think speaks to exactly what the last two or three commenters have talked about. There are many, in John Steen's words, there are storm clouds brewing somewhere. And I don't think it'll be appropriate for the next trigger to be a downgrade in CPS Energy's credit rating before certain actions are taken, which will still cost us money and cost our customers, all of us as customers and ratepayers, money. So it comes down to the economics. And we talk about affordability, but it's still affordability is essentially a byproduct of an economic discussion. So we haven't heard the last of this because it's going to come up in the next phase of the RAC activities when we'll be talking about the rate structuring. So I'd like us to at least go back and look through what Trustee Steen has spoken about in his last in the comments he made in the last board meeting, and just put that in perspective really as we go through these options and ask ourselves the question: do we want to pay more money eventually, because that's what would happen, and just sort of take those comments into consideration when looking at these options before us, before our final vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi. Okay, is there anyone that wants to speak for a portfolio that hasn't?
Hey, Reed. Hi, Michael Sanchez here. Not sure.
I'm sorry, Michael, I didn't see your name. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll keep it real short.
No, you got all the time you want. I'm sorry, I just didn't see your name. I would have called on you.
I'm going to go with portfolio 2 for pretty much all the reasons that were already mentioned before. And I think it offers the right mix, or a comfortable mix of reliability and sustainability, understanding there are going to be new technologies coming and they're coming fast. But I think it's a wonderful stopgap portfolio to take us out to 2030. That's all I got. Thanks.
Anyone else? Sure, Anne Marie. Take the microphone, please.
Thank you. I apologize. Forgot about the microphone. I agree for all the same reasons, also on portfolio 2. I think it's a starting point. I do think that there are some other ones that are a close runner up, and it'll be interesting to see what Benny has to say. But so far, that's how I feel, and everyone has expressed it as well as I would. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Anybody here? Yeah, go ahead, Al.
Back to affordability. I think it's not what CPS can afford, but what our ratepayers can afford. And in that, we need to keep in mind the $208 million that's outstanding now, and leave it at that.
Okay. Anyone else?
Can you hear me?
Hello? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can hear you. I just didn't see your name in the chat. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, I'd just like to say that from my perspective, I'm more inclined to support portfolio number 9 as Councilwoman Viagran for the same reasons that I really feel like it's visionary. It encompasses looking at the future, environmental sustainability. And for that, I, I'm more inclined to cast my vote on portfolio 9 when we vote next week or on the 16th. That's all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, if I can also make one last comment.
Sure, go ahead.
There was a
Take your time.
comment about the relationship between CPS Energy and City of San Antonio. But the history of CPS Energy, in order to have the opportunity to bond indentures set out the way in which the mechanism for the City of San Antonio to receive the 14%. I'm not exactly sure exactly that process, but in many ways, City of San Antonio is inextricably joined to CPS and has been when it was CPS, City Public Service, as it is CPS Energy and San Antonio Public Service Company. So the history is inextricably joined together. I think we need not lose sight of that, as opposed to maybe castigating the city of San Antonio, suggesting that it receives the 14%. But I think that was the cost of admission that the founders and the framers considered years ago as CPS was developing. I just want to say that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else here? Go ahead, Dee Dee, please.
Thank you. I will say that I will not vote for 2, but I do appreciate, the comments. It's obvious, in large part, people are concerned about reliability and affordability. And those are my concerns also. I'm also concerned about the habitability of our planet. And, the science tells us that we have to dramatically reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and we have to reduce emissions. And natural gas is not that answer. We call it fracked gas because there's nothing natural about what it's doing as for its global warming potential. But in terms of, reliability and affordability, our
And we'll have a little sound check. All right, somebody send me a thumbs up if y'all can hear us here. Michael's been doing that.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, well, you can't believe this, but they just updated our software in the middle of our meeting. So I love it. That's what you get with automatic backups, refresh, and all that. Now, we're going to ask Dee Dee, impose on her, to kind of back up. I don't know how many minutes you need to rewind, but at least 5, and just kind of talk us through what you were saying, please.
Okay. Let me see. I can start from the beginning.
Yeah, that's fine
right,
too.
Okay, so
Because people have had coffee and they probably
I
need
was
to.
looking at June. I believe my notes are from June. I didn't date it, but I said the grid was holding up despite triple digit temperatures. And that was due in large part to the performance of wind and solar, which generated 27 gigawatts of electricity during that Sunday's peak demand, close to 40% of the total needed. Wind and solar had the potential to supply almost half of that day's likely record-breaking ERCOT load. But of course, we were missing the transmission capacity. And that wind was being curtailed because it couldn't get moved. And this is coming from ERCOT. This isn't Dee Dee's, opinion. These are numbers straight from ERCOT. A couple days after that, gas and coal plant outages were up to 30% from the weekend. Over 8.5 gigawatts of thermal generation was unavailable that afternoon as demand approached 73 gigawatts. That was 2 times more than what ERCOT expected to be out in the summertime. So, yeah, those were kind of my thoughts about when we talk about, the reliability of gas and definitely, the affordability of gas. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Dee Dee. All right, let's see, I don't see anybody online. Anybody else? Oh, okay. Nakwa, please.
Thank you. I will say that P2 is not on my radar. I'll say that. And so I just wanted to bring in some pieces that have been brought up earlier, and they involve around the health costs not being included in these scenarios and in this modeling. I think skews affordability in that there's an inherent cost that San Antonians have to pay if emissions lead to illness, which they do. And so global emissions, increased global emissions also result in extreme weather, both heat and cold. These are things we know. And if we play our part in increasing emissions, which we are, then it's a matter of upfront costs and who fronts that bill. Do we save now and punt the real costs further down to future generations? And, there's only so much in control of CPS Energy, affordability, being a matrix that involves a wage that we earn for in exchange for work. And unfortunately, the minimum wage in Texas and in San Antonio is still $7.25. So obviously, CPS doesn't set that minimum wage for San Antonians. However, a living wage would greatly change these scenarios and in its affordability. And this is a call to council. Juan's here from the mayor's office. Ana Sandoval is online, and so is Councilwoman Villagran. And to act on and improve the wages of our poorest community members. And I am also not convinced that a true representation of renewable portfolios is outlined as cautioned by the RMI report, which came out last year. And lastly, I just wanted to comment about how all of this plays into affordability and disconnections. You know, we mentioned having a $200 million utility debt. I think that's not something that is unique to CPS Energy. Utility debt is grappling the entire nation. And so I do commend CPS Energy and specifically Rudy for saying that he will not disconnect the poorest community members. I know community members that still make $7.25 an hour, and so those are the people that I am here to represent. And so, disconnecting the poorest community members, I think, is a human rights violation. I think that to some degree, we have to start to accept that basic energy, the power to cook, the power to cool ourselves, the power to be able to have hot water, those should be considered basic elements that we as San Antonians have a right to. And so when we talk about disconnecting people, I know there's talks of, you know, those that can't afford but don't pay. I just want to make sure that those that can't afford don't get disconnected through no fault of their own because of the living conditions and the economical structures that we have imposed on us. And so with all of that, I am still undecided. I think that renewables, I'm leaning towards a renewable portfolio, but there are some analysis needed, further analysis on my end on how this will impact our poorest community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Nakwa. Okay, I think we can drop the picture of the room if you can, so I can see everybody. I see we have another person requesting to talk. That'd be Dana. Go ahead. I'm sorry I couldn't see it, Dana, until they dropped the picture.
Thank you, Reed. Yeah, well, I don't know what to think about those last two performances, but let's move on. I wanted to discuss, I think there's also some inherent risk. And by the way, I don't think we should take lightly the warnings we got from Jim Berg and John Agather about the financial condition of CPS and how it might affect the city. And I think we really need to take that to heart when we're making these decisions. But I wanted to outline one of my thoughts that was embedded in the STEP program. That's not a pro or a con, but it's about the solar rooftop units that for a while that have been and are still are subsidized by the U.S. government, no longer by the city. And I'd like to, I asked if they would just tell us why they stopped doing that. They did say that they thought they met their goals. But in the data that we got, and this is the way I look at it, they said, well, yes, it reduced power demand, but it did so according to not me, but one of the consultants we hired by subsidizing the rooftop units, which then lowered the revenues of CPS and of course the bills by the individual customer, sometimes by so much that it created a negative number for CPS. In other words, it cost CPS money to connect that rooftop unit, and the money that was used basically to take their business. So that's neither here nor there, but so here's the issue. The rooftop unit is not a bad idea because it does reduce the power demand, and it does reduce the bill for the customers that can afford to pay it. And I think CPS has now recognized they shouldn't be subsidizing that. I wish the U.S. government would do the same. But the issue that you have that CPS hasn't talked about is when you get enough of these rooftop units on the grid, that are paying sometimes below what it costs CPS to hook them up, you eventually run into a maintenance problem that does cost money and more money for the people that don't have rooftop units. So, because you still have, that person still has to have power when the sun isn't shining or, or the wind isn't blowing, but in this case, the sun. So they still want power, and it may not be at the peak time, but they still need power on a cloudy day. And it runs into the risks that we have to be kind of cognizant of when we're building these types of systems, thinking we're doing the right thing and a good thing, when it degrades the local grid in such a manner that it costs those people that aren't getting advantage of that more and more money. And that includes the poor people that, some members have been talking about, as well as the people, the richer people that don't have solar rooftop units. But it is a real problem from management to figure out what to do with how to pay and who's going to pay for the higher per person maintenance costs to keep the grid going. I have, it's a real risk that embedded also in our portfolio choices that we have 9.7%, whatever that means, for the STEP program. In other words, it may not actually be that because of the types of risks I'm trying to outline. So again, that's another reason why we as RAC need to be really careful about not taking any more risk than we have to take to have a reliable system.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate that. That whole issue on affordability or how you bill with for folks that do have rooftop solar to be provided base load or backup power. I think that's an issue that will get to be taken up in the billing section, which is the next item this group takes up. I don't see anybody else on there. I've seen everybody here's talk. Let me just make a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank everyone for paying attention and doing their homework. That's a very rewarding thing to work with people that all work. I have been on committees where they don't all work, but everybody here did their work, and I certainly appreciate it. We need to understand that we have got to make progress. We are a bit late to the game on this. We have to deal with the climate change, and we need to deal with it now. Also, I think we have to understand that the value proposition of CPS is very important, and that is that we have reliable power at affordable prices, and we can support our city and our community by continuing to have sustainability. That's all been said by everybody. I'm not going to repeat it. I do want to say a couple of things. I believe we're in a different place today than we were 20 months ago or 18, 19, whenever we started this. Seems like a lifetime ago. We were in a period where we didn't have open discussion. We didn't have open information, and we didn't have willingness to discuss issues. And that's to some extent why this group was formed. I would like to follow up on a comment made by John Agatha and really direct this to our liaison to the board that after we finish the work on how we actually bill, that maybe the board ought to relook now that the culture, to some extent, to a large extent, has changed to a more open and inclusive environment with the community and with the customers. That this organization might no longer be necessary. Also, I'd like to say one more thing, and that is when we're looking at affordability, I've struggled with the metrics on affordability, which is why I've asked Chad to do all the work he's done on affordability. Everybody's right. We have to be careful with the ratepayers' money. Our ratings at CPS are directly related to the city council awarding us rate increases when we need it and when we can justify it, that the costs are reasonable and justifiable. I have no reason to believe that that won't continue, and therefore I believe that we will be able to maintain our rating. However, there is a limit. If we are not continue to be competitive, if we are not affordable, that is a critical issue. And for that reason, we're a little ahead of schedule. And I know we all got a very good presentation from Chad on the cost basis of this. But I would, if it's okay with the group, and I'll not do this if I hear a big protest, I think in about 15 minutes, Chad can go over those slides again, which will help us and refresh us on the affordability part of this. Now, I know we did this once, but frankly, I've had to look at these slides a few times. Do I hear an objection to asking him to do that for us just one more time? Do we have to? No, we don't. So y'all don't want to do that. Okay. All right, we won't. All right, the next thing up is, but I would encourage people to look at those cost slides. Okay, the next thing up is we'll turn this over to Benny and his presentation. Now, after Benny finishes, we will we'll have a question and answer period on this, and we've got plenty of time. So go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Reed. You know, I was looking through this presentation we're about to walk through, and it's a recap really. And I was thinking, we've been doing this a long time, and we are in such a good place compared to where we were when we started. You remember back when we first started talking about doing this, you all have done so much. So I want to start by thanking you, because I feel like we're there. We're right here at the end. It's third and goal. Okay. And it's because of you've stuck with us. You've listened, you've asked questions, you've challenged, and I think it's made a real big difference. So thank you all very much. What I'd like to do is found it. Walk through this presentation, and we can talk along the way, or we can do it afterwards, whatever works best for you all. Okay. This was our commitment. You remember we talked about this coming in. Bottom line is, we need to tell our board, we need to make a recommendation to our board this year. Reliable, affordable, sustainable. So this is our roadmap. This is our journey to 2050. You all have seen this before. We're living in the 20s now. And you remember our board said, we're moving forward to 2050 and we're going to hit the cap target. I can tell you today, we're already working out there on some of those things you're seeing to the right, utilizing new solutions. We were talking with Rudy today about some new opportunities for us. We're going to try and push forward pilots to make sure this technology is here when we need it. It's not here yet. Geothermal's not here yet, small modular, long-term storage, but it's out there, and we're going to make it happen. You remember these, our planning objectives. They're lined up in the order you all put them in. Now, from our perspective, they're all important to our customers. We have to focus on all of them. but this is what we're targeting. This was our planning process. I know I don't have to tell you, you've lived all through it. And of course, this is where we started, what I was talking about a minute ago. Remember back when we were talking about planning objectives? We all got together and we were working through that. Look at where we're at now. Select preferred plan. We followed a great process. This is an industry standard process. So great job. And here's the results of our modeling. You all have seen this before. And you see that it's hard to see. I think on your copy, it's probably easier to read, but the legend at the bottom, where we sought to group each of the columns in a way that they could be evenly scored for purposes of evaluation. And we're showing our work here. You've seen this once today already when Reed shared it. And here's the scores. What we know is higher is better. Higher better aligns with our objectives. The things we all agreed we wanted to accomplish when we set out on this path. So the higher the number, the more closely it aligns. So as you look at that, 1, 2, 4, and 9 most closely align with the objectives we've outlined. And so here we cut to the chase. Here's where we start the comparison. Look at each of them. So we put together sheets that identify the benefits and risks. You've all seen those. So I won't go through them and read. We were talking a little earlier about the plus 6% and plus 105%, for example, P1 all gas. P2 meets the 2030 target, but as it stands today, it doesn't meet the 2040 target. P4 blend, that one still has coal in it. And then finally, P9 renewable blend. As we looked at this, it occurred to us, and as has occurred to many of you, P2 and P9 look to be the most reasonable, closely aligned portfolios to meet our needs of our community between now and 2030. To let us put systems, generation capacity in place that'll replace retiring generation, protect our community, reliable, affordable, environmentally responsible. These two. The takeaway box is really important, regardless of which one's selected, P2 and P9, because we can execute either one of them. We've got to manage an evolving ERCOT market, and we've got to be prepared to leverage new technology. Now, there's some other challenges out there too that we're going to need to work through. Because to achieve carbon neutrality, to achieve 2050, there's some other things we're going to have to address. And flexibility is going to be really important. As we looked at these, we kept coming back to our job is to support this community, provide reliable, affordable, environmentally responsible power for our community. To do that, we have a preference for Portfolio 2. We have that preference because the new technology is not out there yet that's dispatchable. And we know to support renewable energy, we have to have a source of dispatchable generation, dispatchable energy, so that we can move that around as renewables deliver for us. Wind is up, wind is down. We've got to keep the lights on. So we have to have something that we can move around. And today, the viable option is natural gas. Now, the hook there is natural gas can be modernized over time. If we invest in natural gas technology today, to your point, Peter, if we invest in a combined cycle plant today, it'll have a combustion system in it that uses natural gas. If hydrogen becomes a viable source of storage, because that was why hydrogen started. It was a way to store energy for use at a later time. And there's other renewable fuels that people are researching. EPRI has a pretty significant program underway today. They're looking at other renewable fuels. Gas turbines can have their combustion systems revised. Reciprocating engines can have their combustion systems revised such that they can burn these new fuels. They can burn 100% or they can burn to blend. I can tell you that in the labs, they've burned 100% hydrogen and gas turbines. I'll tell you that they don't have it perfected. They won't guarantee it yet. They're up to about 70%, but there's a lot of money going into this. There's a lot of interest around the world. Technology's coming at us fast. So we know that if we have enough gas today to manage the renewable generation that we continue to add, then we can meet the needs of our community. That's the hook for us. That's what we have to keep our eye on. We have to have something we can dispatch. I can tell you we had a conversation with a company today that does flow batteries. Flow batteries are large scale, long duration storage batteries. We hope to be doing a pilot. We're starting to lay the groundwork for that now. If we can make it happen, we will. That long-term storage. Imagine if you could store energy for 24 hours. Think about what that means for Kevin and his team back there dispatching. We can cover those peak periods with generation that was made off peak. That supports solar, right? Because that's what it does, and wind. A lot of our wind still comes at night. So we're looking at those things that will let us push renewables as far as we can, but we can't run off and leave them. You've heard that. Most all of you have said it. We can't run off and leave renewables. We've got to have a support structure in place to help them be successful. As Dee Dee mentioned, during that past winter storm, all the technologies had issues. And we have to be prepared for that. We've built a diversified generation fleet here since the 70s. The leaders that came before us that are here today were focused on diversification to manage risk and keep costs down. We're going to continue to do that because we know it works. But today, P2 makes the most sense from our perspective because it puts us in the best place to enable the continued growth of renewable generation. And I guess I should clean up one other comment we made earlier. When we were asked, are health costs included in our modeling? And no, we don't have a line item in there for health costs. But what we do have is a proxy, and I had to dig a little bit more to be reminded of that, and I did that a little while ago. We do know that the carbon tax that is factored in to our modeling is a proxy for health costs. And what it does, it drives down coal generation, for example, and that's factored into our base case. So you have that data. That's the best proxy we have at this point for health costs. But there is that information there, and CRA can provide a much better explanation than I just did if we would like to go into that. But there is information there in the program. So as I look at this, again, getting back to why we have a preference for P2, market purchases are less. They're about half, 4% for P2 versus 9% for P9. When we look at dispatchability, 57% for P2, 46% for 9, and that 46% is through the shutdown of Spruce unit in 2035 under P9. And then as you look at cost, and we have to think about inclement weather and the exposure we've got there. When we look at these two scenarios, and it's in your scorecard there, but you see there's about a $650 million added cost if we're using P9 because we don't have dispatchable and we have to go to the market and buy to meet our needs. That's the challenge. So for all these reasons, today we have a preference for P2. Now, I know you're going to say it won't fix our needs in 2040, and it won't yet. I truly believe that the technology is coming. I believe that our growth will continue, and we will continue to add generation. We will see numbers come down. New technology will allow us to modify the existing gas plants, and we'll, of course, continue to add our renewables and our storage. But we're going to have to flex. What we've got to do now is get to 2030. Because by 2028, our plants are going to be retired unless ERCOT says, no, you can't do that because you don't have anything to replace them with. Well, our goal is to have something cleaner to replace them with than what we have today. And that's what we're working towards. So I've talked a lot. What I'd like to do is stop and just open up for questions and discussion, or turn it back to Reed, whatever you all prefer.
Okay, you can take the slide down, put the folks back up. Questions, Peter? Go ahead.
Thank you, Benny. I appreciate that synopsis of the recommendation for P2. And you answered my questions to the degree that I wanted to hear as far as the 2 and the 9. And I agree, it's a great bridge, and we just have to be patient and transition, and as we continue to build out the renewables, and just in that term, just being cautious and not overcommitting to the renewables in the short term, but still having them as key players as we transition to that point where the technologies will allow us to go to 2040 and meet the cap goals so that we can hit the cap goals, because that is important. And of course, on the affordability side, being able to be sure that it's affordable and minimizing those market purchases when those costs are going to be higher than what we can afford, all the way down, as Anako says, to those most vulnerable are the ones that are going to take the hit. So we keep them in the forefront as far as being sure that they're covered in these decisions that we make. And I also want to thank Trustee Romero. Thank you so much for being an advocate for us on the board. I see when you present the updates for us and how much attention you give to the work that we're doing, and also for the recommendations on the weighing and quantifying the actual results. Very helpful, and I appreciate that. And thank you, Reed, as well, for facilitating the whole process for us, and all of the CPS staff. It's been a great experience. I know we're voting next week, but I'm grateful for all the work that's gone into this, and I'm very pleased with the modeling process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, here's a question from Andy. It's getting at the amount of gas. Let me ask you this, and maybe this is something that Chad can talk about too. If you look between 2 and 9, the big difference is the metric on affordability. Is there somebody here that can talk about that metric and how that compares to the actual calculations? I don't know if you want to do it here.
Yeah, I'm thinking CRA. Pat, are you out there?
Yeah, I'm here. So I guess I could offer some high level comments there around affordability. I mean, I think first point, just in response to Andy's question, the extreme weather sensitivity was designed to try to do something exactly like that. You know, we haven't backcasted the specific event back to 2021, but take a look at what the costs and the dispatch and the market purchases might have been, or would be under P2 versus P9 and all the other portfolios. In terms of the affordability, you know, at a high level, I think what we're showing is that by 2030, P9 is slightly lower cost than P2. And the reason for that is there is a little bit less new build capital that goes into the system, because that portfolio does not construct or add the 800 to 900 megawatt combined cycle and the associated costs with that, as well as the fuel, but instead converts one of the spruce units for a period of time and relies on the renewables and storage. And as we talked about in the Q&A the other day, those renewable and storage additions get some tax credit benefits, and over the near term, that portfolio is more affordable, at least within the major scenarios. Now, in the extreme weather case, that's where things flip. And I think someone had a point about that earlier, in that P2 is a bit more hedged against those extreme weather conditions because the dispatchable combined cycle gas that I was referencing is able to take advantage of extra dispatch within the ERCOT market, and the portfolio is not subject to those market purchases. So those are some high-level themes. You know, within all the packet that Chad and team produced, you can look at the year-by-year breakdowns and some of the comparisons by component. So there's certainly a lot more detail in there, but I think those are the high-level themes that that we've identified between P2 and P9 in the affordability metric.
Thank you, Pat.
Pat, if you would just talk about one other thing that is kind of confusing to me. If you look at the cumulative capacity additions, the additions are quite lower in 2 than 9. And of course, that's because we've got more short duration storage. Do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit more, since people are kind of focusing on 2 and 9, on your additions and how those are getting reflected in your cost basis? Because it is less capacity added. It's just a different amount, different kind.
Yes, yeah, that's a good follow-up point on that. So it's a different type of capacity, and the cost profile of those capacity additions is going to vary. So you're pointing out a good point about the nameplate capacity versus that reserve margin accredited capacity. And I know we've had some discussions on this over the last couple months. P9 has more nameplate capacity because it has more wind and storage relative to P2, whereas P2 has more gas, primarily combined cycle, but there's also some reciprocating engines in there that are not in P9 either. So those gas resources, because they're fully dispatchable, are assumed to get close to their nameplate capacity when it comes to that peak accounting concept that we've been talking about. So that peak summer evening time, for example, that 1,000 megawatts of gas is going to be able to deliver approximately 1,000 megawatts of capacity, whereas a solar resource or a wind resource is only going to be counted reliably for a fraction of its capacity. Same with short duration storage. So the longer the duration for storage, the more you could charge, the more you're available for the multiple hours of peak that you need throughout the evening and potentially into the nighttime as the market evolves. So if you have, like Benny was saying, a new 24-hour storage duration technology, that's as good as gas, really. But if right now we're working in the world of 4-hour, 6-hour batteries, those units get a little bit of a D-rate. So that's the reason why P9 has, I think, 6,000 megawatts of new additions by 2030, as we report on that slide, whereas P2 has a little bit less than 5,000. So it's the translation of your nameplate capacity to that capacity that's going to meet your reliable reserve margin needs from a modeling perspective. So it's not just the gross amount of capacity when we translate that to cost. Each of these different capacity types has a cost contribution and it provides value to the portfolio. So different resource types may be a little bit higher cost because of the elements that they have associated with building and constructing and operating the unit. If they have fuel, if they have emission obligations, that's going to roll into the costs. Whereas other resource types, you might need more capacity, but they could still be a little bit cheaper to provide the overall cost to the portfolio in light of the tax credits and the value that they provide to the market and to CPS Energy's load as a whole. So there's several trade-offs there. We've hopefully tried to distill some of those points at a high level, but it's a good observation. P9 requires more of a certain type of capacity to meet the peak requirements, and that's why you'll see a larger number than in total versus P2.
So back on the cumulative capacity additions, which is going to everybody's question of how much are we going to have to invest. It looks like to me that the solar is almost it's exactly the same. The big difference is a whole lot more wind, okay, and then a significant amount more of short duration batteries. And again, I can totally understand the whole concept of installing more capacity in order to get more bang for what you've installed. I'm still a little bit concerned in that having installed this additional capacity, it does pick up the advantage that Dee's pointed out many times, that you don't have a fuel cost with this wind, but you do have a transmission liability, which she's also mentioned with this. If you're looking at and I want to turn this back to Benny, if we're, as operators, if we're implementing 2 or 9, what are the pros and cons about implementing the 2 different scenarios? I notice your rice units are in 2 and they're not in 9. So do you have a feeling of what the implementation capacity from the organization is between the 2? Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, thank you. And so as we look at this, what we're seeing is, like Reed indicated, solar stays the same regardless. 2,300 megawatts of wind if we go to P9, no wind. I'm sorry, 500 megawatts of wind in P2, but we're picking up reciprocating engines, about 800 megawatts of reciprocating engines. I'll tell you, these are workhorses of the industry. They tend to be about 17, 18 megawatts of capacity per engine, and they can go from 0 to full load in less than 5 minutes. You can start a whole bunch of them at once, or you can start one of them at once, and you can spool them up that way. They're very flexible. They can match the shift we see when wind drops and when wind increases. They help us keep the lights on. We wouldn't have any of those in P9. That's really, in my mind, one of the bigger risks that I see between the 2. We pick them up in P2. They give us the ability to protect load as it swings around. They're quick. We're also adding combined cycle, about 800 megawatts of combined cycle. I know it says 1380 when you look at it, but that includes the 500 megawatts of firming power we're working on now into the flex power bundle. So that gives you a little longer duration gas at a better efficiency, a lower heat rate for the shoulder months to support us. When you look at market purchases, they're much less under P2. Those market purchases also go to fuel. So DD, to your point, while we're not buying fuel for wind and solar, we do have to pay for the PPAs, and that's how we pay for them. And that's why those fuel costs appear to go up with the renewable scenarios. I think we talked about that. It's in the frequently asked questions. So those are the differences. I wanted to go back to this question up here. Could we get an idea of how much gas would be if we had already had P2 or P9 implemented during Uri? Are we talking about price there, Mr. Casillo, or I'm not clear on the question.
Mainly just like if we had P2 already implemented during that time, how big of an impact would have we had on having P2 already implemented?
Well, we couldn't get enough gas to meet all our needs, and we had coal available, and it helped offset that. So I think we would have been in a little worse position then than we were. But what I will tell you is since then, the Railroad Commission has stepped up their efforts to focus on weatherization for the gas industry. They've done things to make sure that they're on critical circuits, improve insulation, and improve moisture separation, management of their system. So they've done things as well. So I think today we're in a much better place. And of course, that's what we saw when ERCOT issued the SARA here recently as well. But we would have been worse off initially if we didn't have coal back during Uri.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Femi, you're next.
Okay, Benny, thanks for this presenting your recommended portfolios. I think it also helps to clarify some of the analysis that's gone into it, as well as just clearly helping us to maybe not go from 9 to 1, but from 9 to maybe 3 or 4, and then to 1 ultimately, or hopefully. I just want to clarify, I want you to help me understand something, and Pat may need to step in as well. One of the assumptions that was made, at least one of the stated assumptions, I'm looking at my notes here, is we are able to sell excess energy to the ERCOT market. And in a situation where we are shutting down plants, maybe owning less plants or facilities, how much of that was built into all the analysis of the ability to sell, especially where we may be shutting down and not having as much dispatchable capacity at our disposal? How was selling excess considered in this analysis at a very high level?
So I don't think that was a big part of our analysis, but Pat's probably the best person to indicate how he handled excess generation capacity that we had online beyond just some existing wholesale contracts we manage today. Pat, is there anything you could add there?
Yeah, I mean, there's two concepts. So selling energy and selling capacity. There isn't really an opportunity to sell capacity in the ERCOT market per se, and the modeling did not incorporate any extra value for extra capacity that any of these portfolios may have had above and beyond that 13.75% reserve margin. But to the extent the portfolios have extra energy at any point in time, that was liquidated at the ERCOT market price. So across the different scenarios and the different portfolios, we have different market prices and different components and different mixes of generation. And that's all done in the modeling simulation, which is at hourly granularity. So there's an hourly expectation of the CPS Energy load and the resources that are operating and dispatching, and then a market price. So for example, if you had a lot of solar in a portfolio that was operating at high levels during the middle of the day, and you had more energy in the CPS Energy portfolio than demand. It could be solar, it could be your nuclear units also running, and also some gas units that might be running. That excess power gets liquidated into the market. So that's how it operates in real life, and that's what the models do. So to the extent in any given hour the portfolio is long energy, you get credit for that by selling to the market. If it's short, you would buy from the market. So both sides were taken into account.
Yeah, I guess part of this is just me trying to see the reality of how that scenario plays out outside of the model. We can always do a mathematical calculation to say, here's demand, here's what we're generating, therefore the difference can be sold. But to Benny's earlier points, shouldn't there have been some type of contract structure that allows that sale to occur? The reason I'm asking this question is in the broader context of how market sales help reduce rates for CPS Energy customers. So without that contract in place for a sale, I mean, how does your model fit into that reality of the fact that you can't just sell by difference, unless you can, by difference between demand and what's being generated and what's available in the market, and actually having a sale, like a wholesale contract?
Yeah, the modeling is more the former, and yeah, that's how things operate in the real world. So the CPS Energy team that dispatches the plants is offering into the ERCOT market, and units that are operating are selling into the ERCOT market. And if you're longer and you have more energy that's in the ERCOT market relative to what your load demands, that's just going to transact day to day, hour to hour, and
Okay.
CPS Energy will get the benefit of that. And I'll
All
let
right.
the
So I
experts on
guess
the
my
CPS
understanding is
side.
that, yes, sorry, my understanding is that through the settlement process, that sale occurs, you know, in effect. Okay, my other question, which is coming back to portfolio 9, you know, on page 15 of Benny's presentation, where P2 and P9, titled P2 and P9 are most viable. The third bullet there says P9 allows us to meet CAP 2030 and 2040. I guess that means goals without new technology. What new technology are you referring to? I just want to be clear and understand what that what the no new technology means.
So actually what we're saying is that the portfolio as outlined will achieve both the 2030 target, a 41% reduction from 2016 levels, and then the 71% reduction target in 2040.
Okay. When you say no, without new technology, what new technology were you referring to as being absent in that situation?
So new technology would be the use of hydrogen, for example, to fuel our engines, the use of geothermal, the use of small modular nuclear, perhaps, the use of large, long duration storage.
Okay, makes sense. I just wanted to be sure I understood. I suspected, but I wanted the clarification. Then just help me understand one thing again. On the surface of it, P9 appears to have, it's still heavy on wind and short duration storage, but very light on the dispatchables, i.e. the combined cycle, and doesn't have any rice. I guess the smell test for me, and again, I recognize that it's very naive, but the smell test suggests to me that given the risk profile of renewables, given the intermittency and all, they should not come out as cheap relative to 4, relative to 2 in particular. Again, as I said, on the surface, is there something I'm missing in that? Is there anything in your analysis you can point to that says clearly this is where in P9 drops the costs beyond, of course, the no fuel cost for wind and solar?
Yes, sir. So as Pat indicated earlier, the capital purchasing, the capital investments are not required in P9. We do have to make market purchases and they go up in P9, but we don't have the capital investment for new plants, new infrastructure the same way. And so I think that's what you're seeing there.
Yeah, I think that, right. Okay. I'm just trying to see what are the big buckets that would, change tip the scale one way or the other. Does this have anything to do also with a concept that I believe Burns and McDonald had presented earlier? They used the expected load carrying capability concept in one of their earlier presentations, and use that as essentially a basis to say things like solar and wind would score less because they have less ELCC, that is effective load carrying capability. Is that part of the consideration in the larger scheme of things that would affect the price, essentially the revenue requirements associated with P9?
The volume you would contract for, yes, sir. And the numbers we're using, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin. I've got Kevin here to speak to the model, but we use ERCOT standard in terms of estimating for solar and wind. I don't think we're doing a lot of tweaking on that, right?
For wind, Pat, you may want to grade my paper here, but on wind, Dr. Fenman, we use
I think the ERCOT numbers as far as the effective load carrying capability. Solar, we use our peak hours a little bit different from ERCOT. So they use, I think, a higher number than we do. They use 80% as far as solar credit because the ERCOT peak happens a little earlier in the day, about 5 p.m. Our peak usually from a planning perspective is 7 o'clock at night. So our solar number is a little bit lower, is 50%. And then as we get farther out, I think what Pat will say when the model is showing less credit for solar in the out years because that planning year shifts towards our ending 21, so 9 o'clock at night. And obviously you have very little to no solar at 9 o'clock at night.
Yep.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's
Thanks
accurate.
for clarifying. Again, it's just trying to understand in my mind why, what's going up, what's essentially been the pros and the minuses. But I do appreciate the fact that all these have been put through a very rigorous modeling process, which we've seen in the data that has been presented. It just occurred to me that P9 was acting rather strangely, but with the clarification, I can see why the results are coming out the way they look. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You want to go to Michael next?
Michael, you're on.
Okay, great. Yeah, what I wanted to bring up really sort of tags along with part of what Femi was just talking about and asking about the new technologies. And I really wanted to thank you, Benny, for bringing up that there is all this research going on in new technologies that we really can't quite factor in yet. And it may be okay that our current choices don't meet the cap, 2050 goal because we just don't know, what's coming. It's futile to try to reach a 2050 goal that many years off and we don't know what to factor in. There's research going on in renewables and hydrogen options and battery technologies and nuclear technologies. And I guess the parallel example that I'd offer up is that I've worked the last 25 years in the IT industry for the Air Force as an IT engineer. And looking at the past 25 years, besides just computing power going up tremendously, we've made these shifts to cloud computing and edge computing, and our wireless technologies with 5G speeds are here, and artificial intelligence, and all these things that have happened in the last 20 years, 25 years that I've been in the industry. If you would have asked me to predict those things 20 years ago, there's no way we could have predicted the great advancements that have taken place in the IT industry. And I believe with all the research going on right now in the energy industry, I think we're going to see similar advancements. It's just that we can't predict those yet, but we know that that America's investing and the world's investing in that research. And I think that we need to just be looking at that, us looking forward 10 or so years and not worrying as much about the 2050 goal 30 years from now, because we just can't predict that yet. But I think we have to trust that the research going on is going to get us there, and we need to make our choices now, looking out the next 10 years or so. And I thought that was what our original task was to plan out for 10 years, not for 30 years. Over.
Thank you, Michael. If I could, just a minute, don't leave, Benny. They probably got more questions for you. Yeah, I know we didn't want to go through the presentation again, but one of the concerns I've had from the beginning on the cost analysis is using a discounted single number. I think that's the reason that I was so appreciative of the work that was done by Chad and his group, because what they did is they allowed us to look at the cost profiles over time. So I did pass out the presentation that Chad made at two different occasions. And I would just ask the ones that are here and the ones that are home to look back on your presentation. But if you look at slide 3, at the end of 2030, the two costs between 2 and 9 are very, very close. And the reason that you see to some extent on a discounted basis a big delta, and even then it's not a lot, is because if you turn to the next page, which is, you can see that in the early years, P2 has higher generation cost and numbers that are closer to time zero impact the discounted value more. I don't want to get into internal rate of return, net present value, but discounting can, in the end, give a little bit of a distortion. And if you look on page 4 at the 2030, by the time we get there, whether you're looking at the generation cost or whether you're looking at the uncertainty and an impact, when you're looking at page 4, they're just almost dead on, and that's where you're going to be. The difference, I would tell you, is that it depends on whether you're looking at fixed cost or variable cost, and 5 shows you that. I'd also ask you to look at the impact on a weather event. I know this isn't perfect, but if you look at a weather event, page 6, and you look at 2 to 9, you can see where the risk profile goes up there. So hopefully that didn't take up too much time, and hopefully everyone will go back and look at that, because discounting can sometimes give favor to low costs in the beginning and not totally tell you where you are in the end. Now let's see who else we've got on the queue. Nothing there. Anything here? Okay, anything here? Anything there? Going, gone. We're out of here. See you next week. Or the 15th. Get a microphone. We want to hear you. Yeah, we're not out yet then. Go ahead.
On the 15th, we'll be voting, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then where does that recommendation go? Like, is it?
Well, that's what we're going to discuss after we vote,
Oh.
because it's not for me to say, it's for y'all to say. But ultimately, this recommendation will obviously have to go to the board in some way, okay? But how we do it, and I think we need some discussion on after we decide what we're going to do. Let's do what and then how. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's another question. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my question is, for affordability, is there, maybe it's in here and I don't see it anywhere, a breakdown of any subsidies that are contributing to this?
Okay, that is a great point. And I think Pat has said it, and I'll let him say it again. But the subsidies are in here for some of the IRA, but they're not in for the. Pat, are you still on?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. So go through that again so that we can all hear it.
Yes, I think there's a Q&A that may be
There he is.
released that will have this in writing, a couple pages of write-up, so you can refer to that if it's been released or will be in the next couple days. But to be maybe summarize it, there are several technologies that are eligible for subsidy that through the IRA that have been incorporated: wind, solar, storage, and hydrogen. Green hydrogen production are the 4 technology types that show up across the board that are included. And I should add geothermal is the 5th. So there's a little bit of geothermal in some of the portfolios. So in the IRA, those technologies are eligible for either production tax credits or investment tax credits. In the memo or the Q&A write-up, you'll see that we laid out the different tiers that are available in the IRA. There's a base tier, there's a multiplier tier that is available if prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements are met. And then there are bonuses associated with either domestic content or what are known as energy communities, which I think Dee Dee was asking about last time in the Q&A on Friday. What we've incorporated are all the credits eligible for the base and the 5 times multiplier for prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. We have not incorporated the bonuses associated with either domestic content or potential energy communities, and there's some write-up about why and what the uncertainty there is. At a high level, it's pretty significant. So the production tax credit is $25 a megawatt hour and escalating to inflation over time. The investment tax credit, including that multiplier that I mentioned, is 30% of the cost of a new resource that's generally applicable to storage. And then the hydrogen production is up to $3 per kilogram of hydrogen. So when we build up all the costs, all of that is embedded in the data. So to the extent you're interested in looking at what the net dollar per megawatt hour costs are or dollar per kilowatt year for the storage, we have appendices on that. But hopefully that helps. Those subsidies are incorporated. Everything that we've done is net of those subsidies. There's some uncertainty about actual projects that could make the credits either better or worse than what we've assumed. And in that write-up, you'll see how the subsidies kind of compare with the range of costs across scenarios. So just to be clear, across every run here, those IRA subsidies are incorporated in the affordability metric.
Thank you, Pat. I've got a question here. Okay, we'll do a vote and then we'll drop out the low ones. We'll keep the top four. We'll vote again, keep dropping one out. So I do want to mention a couple of things. First of all, both of our consultants have done a great job for us. And I was going to say this next week, but I'll say it now and then I'll say it again next week. Charles River Associates and Burns & McDonnell have done a great job. Burns & McDonnell, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, their report is here for you. Please read it. It's very good. They're also here if you have questions after having seen that. They'll be here and they can stay on. We're getting out a little early, so stay on and answer any questions of yours. Anybody online that has any questions that aren't answered, just let Ann know and she'll get with Burns and McDonnell and we'll get you an answer. Yes, I'm sorry.
On the subsidies, should we consider those 100%? I mean, they are a political will. It could be taken away. Are they there for sure?
Yeah, this bill, my experience is this bill is a lot more exact, and I can get more people that are smarter on this than I am, but this bill didn't just say we're going in this direction, set the regs which can get changed. The bill was very specific about how these were going to be paid and even escalated with inflation. The part that is not included in here is a very important point, and we need to keep that in our mind, and that is these payments will impact the community. I don't think those are in here, and I think that's what Anak was referring to. So yes, I just don't see them changing the law. I do see when they have a law and it requires for regulations to be written that the regulations can get challenged. You could always, I guess, have this law challenged by the Supreme Court. So yeah, there are chances, but I don't know. We need to probably have somebody that's smarter than I on this.
Should we, when they show the numbers or the budgeting, can they show the whole number and then as a subtotal and then start minusing the subsidies from there? Because that way we'll know what the total damage is going to be if those others.
I don't think we have time for that, Al, just to be honest.
No, I'm just saying not for this presentation.
Yeah.
We have enough information now to make a decision.
Yeah. I'm sure that they're going to be looking at this. And remember, and I think this follows on what Femi said earlier, and that is that when the climate action group finished, they knew they weren't finished. When this is finished, this is not finished. As Dee Dee has said many times, this is an ongoing process. Now that we have the base work done, I'm hopeful that CPS will take this as an ongoing year in, year out activity that they will continue to do and then be able to quickly and nimbly adjust when new things come up, as opposed to restarting this, building this little vehicle each time.
I guess I just mentioned it only because I see the subsidy as a political will.
Yeah.
And just as it
Yeah.
political positive, it could be a political negative as well with new elected officials and things change.
Yeah, I've been through phasing out lead, sulfur, ethanol. I've watched these things for 30 or 40 years. Oh God, almost 50 years. And this one is about as hard as I've ever seen. I mean, it's locked in, but it could. You're right, Al. I'm not arguing that. Oh, we got another question here. Yes, Michael, the Burns and McDonald report, I believe it was emailed, and that was in the email that Ann did
So that was
a day or so ago. Yesterday.
That was in the form of a slide deck.
Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't know if there was a
Christopher has a question. I guess we're back in session. So Christopher, go ahead. Christopher, we don't hear you. I'm sorry.
How about now?
We got you.
All right. Two questions. One is more process. When we say we're going to vote and make a recommendation, aside from actually just sitting around the table and voting, when we deliver our recommendation to the board, what form is that going to take? Is it going to be a 5-page paper? Is there going to be a 30-page addendum, a 60-page addendum? Just in terms of how we process our recommendations that we're going to be passing along. And then the next question, to pick up a line of thought from earlier, I think I read this, but I get the impression that when we have had instances of surplus energy generation, the lion's share of that tends to come from, say, excess solar and wind, for instance, in addition to the nuclear. I could be wrong about that, but I'm curious if that's accurate and if it tends to be seasonal, and if we can, maybe this is a Q&A question for later, but if we have a number on how that tends to turn out on a monthly or annual basis.
Okay, I'll answer your first one. We'll let Benny talk about the second one, or one of the folks in his group. The first one is, I don't know how we're going to do a report. We're going to talk about that after we decide if we can come up with a recommendation, exactly what the group wants to, how they want to present it, and in how much detail. So I don't plan on speaking for the group. I don't mind delivering the group's message, but I think that message needs to be worked out. And now we have someone to address the second question.
Thank you, Reed. If you would just talk a little bit about how we sell power and where the excess comes from.
So great question, Christopher. It's Kevin Paulo. Just to give you kind of a quick update or quick explanation of how it works. Pat talked a little bit about it earlier, but when we look at how we dispatch units on a daily basis, essentially, units are dispatched to price. So if the units are going to make money, so to speak, based on the ERCOT market price, they will run. Our first mission is to serve our community. So all, the generation that we use goes to our community first. When we add all that up, let's say we have, like today, about 3,000 megawatts of load. The first 3,000 megawatts of generation, that we have serves our community. Anything above that, and it happens on a 15-minute basis, will get sold to ERCOT, and that will produce wholesale revenue. Part of your question gets into cost allocation when you talked about renewables, wind, solar, and nuclear. The way we would do that cost allocation process is we assign renewables to our native load, as well as the nuclear from an emissions-free perspective. And then everything else essentially stacks according to cost. So our community will get the lowest cost generation. That's one of the ways that we try to minimize impact to customer bills. And then essentially the higher price generation, the higher cost generation will go towards the wholesale sales. That's kind of how a day will work in the life of market operations, if you will. as far as how we create or how the units dispatch to produce wholesale revenue.
Thank you.
All right. Let's try this again. All right. If you fail, just keep trying, right? I'm trying to get us out of here before dark. All right. We done? We done? We done? We're done. Thank y'all. See you on the 15th. Bring your voting sheet.